Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance, watching the stars through the main view screen. His ship had been exploring the outer rim for 3 months now, mapping new systems and checking for signs of life. It was routine, work, the kind that kept humanity busy while the bigger alien species handled the important stuff in the Galactic Federation. Jake was okay with that. Humans were still the new kids in the galaxy, only been part of the Federation for 200 years. Most of the other species had been flying between stars when humans were still figuring out fire. The Zephyrians had technology that seemed like magic. The Corthans could plan military campaigns that would make human generals weep. The Viridians could talk their way out of any conflict. But humans were good at being stubborn. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Lisa Carter from her science station. She was the ship's xenobiologist, one of the smartest people Jake had ever met. When Lisa said something was strange, it usually meant trouble. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked, walking over to look at her readings. "There's a massive energy drain coming from the Epsilon system. 3 planets there, all with Federation colonies. But the star is losing power fast." Lisa's face was pale as she ran the numbers again. "Sir, at this rate, the star will collapse in about 6 weeks. Jake felt his stomach drop. 3 planets meant hundreds of millions of people. "Are you sure?" Running it again now. Lisa's fingers flew over her console. "No, sir, I was wrong. It's not 6 weeks. It's 3 weeks, maybe 4 if they're lucky." The bridge went quiet except for the hum of the ship's engines. Jake's mind raced through the possibilities. Stars didn't just start dying for no reason. Someone was doing this. "Take us to the Epsilon system. Maximum speed," Jake ordered. "Sir, that's outside our patrol area," said his first officer, Ryan Foster. "Shouldn't we contact Federation Command first?" "We'll contact them on the way. Right now, 3 planets full of people are about to die, and we're the only ship close. Enough to help." The Defiance jumped to faster than light speed, and Jake sent an emergency message to Federation headquarters. By the time they reached the Epsilon system 8 hours later, he had his answer. The nearest Federation fleet was 3 months away. The planets would be dead long before help arrived. What they found in the Epsilon system made Jake's blood run cold. A massive alien structure, bigger than Earth's moon, was wrapped around the star like a metal spider. Huge cables of unknown material were sucking energy directly from the star's core. Already the star was noticeably dimmer than it should have been. "I'm detecting the structure's origin," Lisa reported. "It's not Federation technology. It's not anything in our databases." Jake opened a communication channel to the alien structure. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Morrison of the United Nations ship Defiance. You are killing 3 inhabited worlds. Stop your operations immediately." The response came quickly, in perfect Federation standard language. "Primitive human vessel. You have no authority here. The hegemony claims this system by right of ancient law. Your species has existed for mere moments. We have harvested stars since before your world had life." "I don't care how old you are," Jake said. 400 million people live on those planets. You're committing genocide." The alien laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "We are the hegemony. We take what we need. If lesser species happen to die, that is not our concern. You will leave now or join them in death." Jake was about to respond when alarms started blaring all over the ship. On the view screen, a Federation monitoring station that had been orbiting the 4th planet was suddenly gone. Just gone. Where 50,000 people had been working and living, there was now only empty space and scattered debris. "They destroyed the entire station," Ryan whispered. Just like that. The hegemony spoke again. "That was a warning, infant species. Leave now." Jake stared at the debris field where the station had been. 50,000 people, families, scientists, workers. People who had been alive and breathing just seconds ago. He thought about the 3 planets below, their people looking up at a star that was slowly dying. His communication console beeped. A message from Federation Command. "Captain Morrison, this is High Chancellor Vextar of the Federation Council. We have reviewed the situation in the Epsilon system. The alien force calling itself the hegemony Appears to be extremely advanced and hostile. All Federation ships are ordered to retreat immediately and await the arrival of the main fleet in 3 months. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Jake read the message twice. He looked at the 3 planets on his screen, their blue and green surfaces still beautiful, still alive, for now. Captain? Ryan asked quietly. Orders, sir. Jake knew what he should do. He should follow orders, retreat, and hope that somehow the Federation fleet would arrive in time. Hope that the hegemony would show mercy. Hope that 400 million people wouldn't die while the galaxy's greatest military force took 3 months to get organized. But Jake Morrison was human, and humans were really bad at following orders when people were about to die. Open a channel to Federation Command, he said. Channel open, sir. Jake looked directly into the camera that would carry his message across the galaxy. Federation Command, this is Captain Morrison of the UNS Defiance. Your orders have been received and noted. He paused, thinking about his words carefully. Message to the Federation Council. Humanity respectfully declines. Ryan stared at him. Sir, I just told the entire Galactic Federation that we're not following orders. Jake turned to his crew. Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle to the edge of the system. I'll make sure you get picked up safely. But I'm not leaving these people to die. Not one person moved toward the shuttle bay. Lisa looked up from her science station. Captain, I'm detecting more hegemony ships incoming, a lot more. How many? 3 full fleets, sir. At least 100 ships, some of them the size of small moons. Jake nodded. The hegemony was bringing everything they had to crush one small, human ship. That seemed about right. Well then, he said, settling into his captain's chair. I guess we're about to find out what happens when someone breaks the oldest law in galactic history. On the view screen, the first hegemony ships began to appear at the edge of the system, their dark hulls blocking out the stars. News of Captain Morrison's defiance spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On Zephyr Prime, the planet of logic and reason, crowds gathered around public screens in shocked silence. The Zephyrians prided themselves on making careful, calculated decisions. The idea that anyone would openly defy the Federation Council was almost impossible for them to understand. On Kortha, the warrior homeworld, the reaction was different. In the great halls where Korthan generals planned their battles, there was something that hadn't been heard in centuries. Nervous laughter. War leader Brickstall watched the human captain's message for the 5th time, then turned to his staff. In 800 years of warfare, I have never seen such magnificent stupidity, he said. One ship against an empire. Either these humans are completely insane, or they know something we don't. On Viridia, the planet of diplomats and negotiators, emergency sessions were already beginning. The Viridians were master peacekeepers, but they had never dealt with anything like this. How do you negotiate with a species that ignores logic, defies authority, and seems willing to fight impossible battles? But it was on Earth where the real reaction began. Admiral Kate Sullivan was in her office at Luna Base when the emergency alert came through. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, someone who had spent 30 years keeping human space safe and peaceful. She read Morrison's message 3 times, then did something she hadn't done since her academy days. She smiled. Computer, open a priority channel to all human ships, stations, and colonies, she said. Channel open, Admiral. Kate looked into the camera, knowing that her next words would either save humanity or destroy it. This is Admiral Sullivan, commander of all human space forces. As of this moment, Operation Lazarus is in effect. I repeat, Operation Lazarus is in effect. All across human space, people stopped what they were doing. Operation Lazarus was a plan that had been discussed in secret for decades but never used. It was the plan for what to do if humanity ever faced complete destruction. All military vessels, report to the Epsilon system immediately. All civilian ships with faster-than-light capability, prepare for military conversion. All research stations, mining operations, and exploration teams, abandon your current missions and return home. Kate paused, thinking about what she was asking of her people. Come home, All of you. Come home now. Within hours, the exodus began. Human ships from across the galaxy turned toward the Epsilon system. Merchant vessels were fitted with whatever weapons could be found. Science ships had their sensors converted into targeting systems. Even passenger liners were armed with mining lasers and torpedo tubes. The other Federation species watched this massive movement with growing alarm. The Zephyrians sent urgent messages asking what the humans were planning. The Viridians offered to mediate. The Corthans, despite themselves, began moving their own ships closer to human space. In the Epsilon system, Captain Morrison played a deadly game of hide-and-seek with the first hegemony scouts. The Defiance was fast and well-armed for an exploration ship, but it was still just one vessel against an empire. Morrison used every trick he could think of, hiding behind asteroids, using the star's radiation to mask his ship's signature, launching false signals to confuse the enemy. But the hegemony ships were getting closer. War Prime Zakthul commanded the hegemony fleet from his flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Void's Edge. He was ancient, even by hegemony standards, and had conquered 47 different species. The idea that primitive humans would dare to oppose him was almost amusing. "How many ships do these humans have in their entire fleet?" he asked his tactical officer. "Intelligence suggests approximately 800 vessels of various sizes, War Prime. Most are civilian ships with light armament." Zakthul laughed, a sound like metal grinding against stone. 800 ships against 3,000. And they think they can oppose us? He settled back in his command throne. This will be over quickly. Perhaps we should keep a few humans alive as pets, to remind other species what happens when they defy the hegemony. But Zakthul had made a mistake that would cost him dearly. He had never studied human history. He didn't know about the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off thousands. He didn't know about the Alamo, where a handful of defenders fought to the last man. He didn't know about Stalingrad, where an entire city refused to surrender despite impossible odds. He didn't understand that humans were at their most dangerous when they were completely outnumbered. Back on the Defiance, Lisa Carter made a discovery that changed everything. She had been studying the energy patterns from the hegemony's star-draining device, looking for any weakness they could exploit. "Captain, I think I found something," she said, excitement and fear mixing in her voice. "What is it?" "The device they're using to drain the star, it works by creating a controlled black hole in the star's core. The black hole sucks out energy, which they convert and store." Lisa brought up a diagram on the main screen. "But here's the problem. If someone could overload their system with enough energy at once, the black hole would become unstable." "What would happen then?" "The black hole would collapse, releasing all the stored energy at once. It would destroy their device and save the star." Lisa paused. "But the explosion would be massive. Anything within 1,000,000 kilometers would be vaporized." Morrison nodded slowly. "How much energy would we need to overload their system?" "The power core of a human dreadnought detonated at exactly the right moment." Lisa met his eyes. "It would be a one-way mission, Captain. Whoever flies that ship won't be coming back." Before Morrison could respond, his communications officer called out, "Captain, we're getting a message from Admiral Sullivan. The human fleet is entering the system." On the view screen, points of light began to appear. First dozens, then hundreds, of human ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. They came in no organized formation, just a massive wave of vessels of every size and type. Military cruisers flew alongside converted cargo ships. Exploration vessels traveled next to armed passenger liners. "Admiral Sullivan to Captain Morrison," came the voice over the communication system. "Sorry we're late to the party. Hope you saved some dancing partners for us." Morrison grinned. "Admiral, you have perfect timing. But I have to warn you, the odds aren't exactly in our favor." "Captain, when have the odds ever been in humanity's favor? Besides, we brought friends." On the long-range scanners, Morrison could see them. Ships from other Federation species flying alongside the human fleet. Not many, but enough. The Corthans had sent a squadron of their best warships. A few Zephyrian science vessels had joined, their advanced sensors ready to help target enemy. weak points. Even some Viridian ships were there, their diplomatic immunity allowing them to carry humanitarian supplies. War Prime Zakthul watched the human fleet arrive and felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: doubt. The humans weren't organizing into proper battle lines. They weren't following any known military doctrine. They were just charging straight at his much larger force like some kind of berserker horde. War Prime, his tactical officer said nervously, their attack pattern doesn't match anything in our combat databases. We can't predict their movements. Zakthul studied the chaotic human formation. Ships were breaking off in random directions, some diving toward the star, others heading for the outer planets. There was no logic to it, no strategy he could understand. It doesn't matter, he said, though his voice carried less certainty than before. We outnumber them 3-1. Primitive tactics cannot overcome superior numbers and technology. But, as the first human ships opened fire, Zakthul began to realize that he might have seriously underestimated these strange, stubborn creatures from the third planet of a yellow star. The battle began at exactly 1432 Galactic Standard Time, and within the first 10 minutes, every military computer in the galaxy was trying to figure out what the humans were doing. Admiral Sullivan's flagship, the UNS Indomitable, led the charge directly into the center of the hegemony formation. Behind her came 800 human ships, but they weren't flying in any pattern that made sense. Some ships dove low, using the star's gravity to slingshot themselves at impossible speeds. Others spread wide, forcing the hegemony to split their fire. A group of converted cargo ships actually flew straight up, attacking from an angle no one expected. They're completely insane, muttered War Prime Zakthul, watching his tactical display with growing confusion. No species fights like this. His tactical officer was sweating, something hegemony warriors rarely did. Sir, our targeting computers can't lock onto them. They keep changing direction at random. It's like they're making up their strategy as they go. Because they are, Zakthul realized. They have no plan. They're just attacking everything at once. What Zakthul didn't understand was that chaos was humanity's greatest weapon. While other species spent years planning perfect battles, humans were masters of improvisation. They could adapt to any situation, change tactics in the middle of a fight, and find opportunities where others saw only disaster. Commander Beth Richards led a squadron of 20 fighters in what would later be called the Broken Arrow Run. Her job was to punch through the hegemony's heaviest defenses and clear a path for the main assault. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. "All right, boys and girls," she said over the squadron channel. "Remember what we're here for. 3 planets full of people who are counting on us. Let's give them something to remember." Her fighters screamed through space at maximum speed, straight toward the largest hegemony dreadnought. Enemy fire lit up the darkness around them. Richards watched 2 of her pilots disappear in balls of flame, then 3 more. Her own ship shook as energy blasts tore through her shields. "Commander, we've lost half the squadron," reported her wingman, Tony Martinez. "Then we'll have to work twice as hard," Richards replied, launching every missile she had at the enemy ship's weapon systems. "All fighters target their gun ports, make them blind." The surviving human fighters swarmed over the massive hegemony ship like angry insects. They were so small and fast that the big ship's weapons couldn't track them. One by one, the dreadnought's guns went silent. "Path is clear, Admiral," Richards reported. "Send in the cavalry." Admiral Sullivan didn't hesitate. "All ships, full, attack. Remember, we're not trying to win pretty. We're trying to win." What followed was unlike any space battle in galactic history. Human ships used ramming attacks, deliberately crashing into enemy vessels. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they improvised, using everything from mining charges to cargo containers filled with explosives. One merchant captain actually used his ship's waste disposal system to launch garbage at an enemy fighter, successfully blinding its sensors. The hegemony had superior technology and numbers, but they had never faced an enemy that fought with such complete disregard for conventional tactics. Their ships were designed to fight organized battles between disciplined fleets. They had no idea how to handle humans who turned cargo ships into bombs and used passenger liners as battering rams. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Sullivan coordinated the chaos with the skill of a conductor leading an orchestra. She had over 100 ship captains all talking at once, reporting damage, requesting orders, or just shouting challenges at the enemy. "Admiral, the merchant ship Steady Income is requesting permission to ram that enemy cruiser," reported her communications. "Officer, permission granted. Tell them to make it count." The passenger liner New Horizons wants to know if they can use their dining room tables as projectiles. Why not? Everything else is fair game today. But even human determination had its limits. The hegemony's superior numbers were starting to tell. For every enemy ship destroyed, humanity lost 2 of their own. The survivors were running low on ammunition, their hulls were damaged, and their crews were exhausted. On the Defiance, Captain Morrison watched the battle with growing desperation. The human fleet was fighting magnificently, but it wouldn't be enough. The hegemony still had over 2,000 ships, and the star-draining device was still active. In a few more hours, the battle would be over, and 3 planets would still die. "Lisa, how's that plan of yours coming along?" he asked. Dr. Carter looked up from her calculations, her face pale with exhaustion. "I've got it worked out, Captain. We need to detonate a ship's power core right at the base of the draining device. The explosion will disrupt the black hole and save the star." "What kind of ship?" "Something big enough to carry a military-grade reactor. A cruiser at minimum, but a dreadnought would be better." Morrison nodded, then opened a channel to Admiral Sullivan. "Admiral, this is Morrison. I need to speak with you privately." A few minutes later, Sullivan's face appeared on his private screen. She looked tired but determined, the kind of person who would keep fighting until the last star burned out. "What is it, Captain?" Morrison explained Carter's plan in detail. When he finished, Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. "You're talking about a suicide run," she said finally. "Yes, ma'am, but it's the only way to save those planets." Sullivan looked around her bridge, at the crew members who had followed her into this impossible battle. "Captain, you've done enough. Let me take the Indomitable. She's bigger than your ship, more likely to succeed." "With respect, Admiral, this was my idea from the beginning. I'm not going to let someone else finish it." Sullivan smiled, the tired smile of someone who understood exactly what Morrison was feeling. "Captain, there's something you should know. That old galactic law about never defying humanity? It wasn't written as a warning to other species. It was written as a promise, ma'am. It means that when the darkness comes, when hope seems lost, humans will be there. We don't run from impossible fights, we run toward them." Sullivan paused. "You want to make this run, Captain? Then make it count. Show the galaxy what humans do when everything depends on us." Morrison felt a strange calm settle over him. He had known from the moment he decided to stay in this system that it might come to this. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going to ram the star-draining device. Anyone who wants to leave, get to the escape pods now. No shame in it." "No one moved, Captain," said Ryan Foster. "We've been with you this far. We're not stopping now." Morrison nodded, then turned to his helmsman. "Take us in, full speed, straight at the device." The Defiance broke away from the main battle, accelerating toward the massive alien structure wrapped around the dying star. Enemy ships moved to intercept, but the human fleet seemed to sense what was happening. Every available ship turned to escort Morrison's final run, creating a corridor of fire through the enemy formation. "Captain," Lisa called out as they approached the device, "I'm reading massive energy buildups. When we hit, it's going to be big." "How big?" "Big enough to see from the next galaxy." Morrison opened a final channel to the entire fleet. "This is Captain Morrison to all human ships. Earth remembers her children. Tell them we came when they called." The Defiance slammed into the base of the star-draining device at nearly the speed of light. Morrison's ship, the alien device, and everything within 1,000,000 kilometers disappeared in a flash of light that briefly outshone the star itself. When the light faded, the star was whole again, burning steady and bright. The 3 planets below were safe, but the battle was far from over. The shockwave from the Defiance's sacrifice rolled across the battlefield like a tide of light and energy. When it passed, the star burned bright and healthy again, its 3 planets safe from destruction. But the cost had been terrible. Nearly 200,000 humans were dead, including Captain Morrison and his entire crew. War Prime Zakthul stared at the empty space where the star-draining device had been, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. In 8 centuries of conquest, he had never seen anything like it. The humans had actually succeeded in destroying his most powerful weapon by flying a ship directly into it. War Prime, his tactical officer said quietly. Shall we continue the attack? Zakthul looked at his remaining forces. He still had nearly 2,000 ships against fewer than 600 human vessels. By any logical measure, he should press the attack and crush the human fleet completely. But logic seemed to mean very little when dealing with humans. They destroyed our star harvester, he said, almost to himself. They actually destroyed it. Sir, it was just one ship. We can still win this battle. But Zakthul was beginning to understand something that would change everything. He had been fighting humans for less than a day, and they had already done the impossible twice. First, we had defied their own government to protect strangers. Then they had sacrificed themselves to save planets they had never even visited. What else might they be capable of? Send a message to the High Command, he ordered. Tell them we need the Void Spheres. His tactical officer went pale. The Void Spheres were the hegemony's ultimate weapon, devices that could erase entire star systems from existence. They had only been used 3 times in hegemony history, against species that had proven impossible to defeat by conventional means. War Prime, surely regular fleet action will be sufficient. Did you not see what just happened? Zakthul snarled. These creatures destroyed our star harvester with a single ship. They fight like madmen and die like heroes. We cannot defeat them with normal tactics. While the hegemony called for their ultimate weapons, news of the battle spread across the galaxy. The Federation Council watched the recordings in stunned silence. The Zephyrians, masters of logic and reason, could not understand how the humans had succeeded against such impossible odds. The Viridians called for emergency peace negotiations. The Korthans did something unprecedented in their warrior culture. They formally requested permission to serve under human command. We wish to learn this strange form of honor, declared war leader Brixtal in his message to Admiral Sullivan. The humans fight not for conquest or glory, but for the protection of others. This is a concept worth studying. But it was on Earth that the real response began. President Maria Santos addressed the United Nations. Her words broadcast to every human colony in the galaxy. Today we learned what it truly means to be human, she said. Captain Morrison and his crew gave their lives to save 400 million strangers. They did this not because they were ordered to, but because it was right, because someone had to stand up and say no more. She paused, looking directly into the camera. The hegemony thinks they can intimidate us with superior numbers and advanced weapons. They are about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was never our technology. It was our refusal to accept that some things are impossible. Admiral Sullivan, now commanding the survivors of the human fleet from her damaged flagship, received an urgent message from Earth. The hegemony had positioned 12 massive spherical devices around human colonies throughout the galaxy. Intelligence suggested these were planet-killer weapons of unknown design. Admiral, reported Fleet Commander Alex North, one of the few senior officers to survive the battle. The hegemony is demanding our complete surrender. They're giving us 72 hours to evacuate our military forces from all human worlds, or they'll use those weapons. Sullivan stared at the tactical display showing the positions of the Void Spheres. Each one was positioned to destroy a major human colony. Mars, Luna Base, New Geneva, the research stations around Jupiter. All of it could be gone in an instant if the hegemony decided to act. Admiral, what are your orders? North asked. Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Morrison's sacrifice, about the humans who had died protecting strangers, about the 3 planets below them that were now safe because her people had refused to abandon them. Send a message to Earth, she said finally. Tell them to prepare the reserve fleets. Tell them we're not surrendering. Ma'am, if we don't surrender, they'll destroy our colonies. Alex, if we do surrender, they'll destroy them anyway. That's what conquerors do. Sullivan turned to face him. But there's something else. Dr. Carter's team has been studying the readings from those sphere weapons. Lisa? Dr. Carter, who had been transferred to the Indomitable after the Defiance's destruction, brought up her analysis on the main screen. Admiral, those aren't just weapons. They're prison cells. Every species the hegemony has destroyed over the centuries is still alive, trapped in pocket dimensions inside those spheres. How many species are we talking about? At least 40, possibly more. Entire civilizations that have been imprisoned for thousands of years. Sullivan felt a cold anger building in her chest. The hegemony hadn't just been conquering species, they had been collecting them, keeping them alive in eternal captivity. It was worse than genocide. Is there a way to free them? Theoretically, yes. But it would require someone to override the sphere's control systems from the inside. It would be a one-way mission. Commander North stepped forward. Admiral, I volunteer. Alex, you don't even know what's involved yet. Doesn't matter. Morrison showed us what it means to be human. He didn't ask what the odds were, he just did what needed to be done. North looked around the bridge at the faces of the survivors. We came out here to save 3 planets. Turns out we can save 40 species if we're willing to pay the price. Sullivan studied the young commander's face. He was scared. She could see that. But he was determined. It was the same look Morrison had worn when he decided to stay and fight. What would you need? Dr. Carter brought up a schematic. A small strike team, maybe 6 people. They'd have to get inside one of the spheres and reach the central control chamber. Once there, they could cascade a shutdown signal to all the other spheres simultaneously. And then the pocket dimensions collapse. The trapped species are freed, and whoever's inside the spheres. Carter didn't finish the sentence. Dies, North said simply. I understand, Doctor. When do we leave? But before Sullivan could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The communications officer looked up from his station, his face pale. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the hegemony. War Prime Zach Thul wants to speak with you directly. Sullivan straightened her uniform and walked to the main view screen. Put him through. The face that appeared was alien but somehow familiar. Ancient, tired eyes looked out from a scarred and weathered face. This was a being who had seen centuries of war, who had conquered dozens of worlds and destroyed countless lives. Human Admiral, Zach Thul said, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and frustration. You have cost me a star harvester, half my fleet, and the lives of many good warriors. Your species fights like nothing I have ever encountered. War Prime, you came into our space and tried to murder 400 million innocent people. What did you expect? I expected you to behave like every other species I have conquered. I expected you to calculate the odds, realize you could not win, and surrender. To preserve your own lives, Zach Thul leaned forward. Instead, you threw away the lives of 200,000 of your people to save strangers. Those strangers were Federation citizens. They were under our protection. No, Zach Thul said slowly. They were not. Your own government ordered you to retreat. You chose to disobey and fight anyway. He paused. Why? Sullivan thought about the question. Why had they fought? Why had Morrison sacrificed himself? Why was she now planning another suicide mission to save species she had never heard of? Because that's what humans do, she said finally. We stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. We fight impossible battles because someone has to. And we never, ever give up when lives are at stake. Zach Thul was quiet for a long moment. I have lived for 800 years, Admiral. I have conquered 47 species and harvested the energy of 1,000 stars. But I have never encountered anything like humanity. Then you should have stayed in your own territory. Perhaps. Zach Thul's image flickered. You have 72 hours to surrender, Admiral. After that, I will activate the void spheres and your colonies will cease to exist. I hope, for your sake, that your leaders are more reasonable than your soldiers. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Sullivan looked around at her officers, seeing the same determination in their faces that she felt in her heart. "Well," she said, "I guess we have 72 hours to pull off another miracle." The surrender broadcast went out exactly 71 hours and 59 minutes after War Prime Zakthul's ultimatum. Admiral Sullivan appeared on every channel in the galaxy, her uniform torn, and her face showing the exhaustion of someone who had fought an impossible battle and lost. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the United Nations Space Force," she said, her voice heavy with defeat. "After careful consideration, humanity formally surrenders to the hegemony. All human military forces will stand down immediately. We cannot watch our colonies burn for the sake of pride." Across the galaxy, beings of a dozen species watched in shock. The humans, who had defied their own government and fought against impossible odds, were finally giving up. On Kortha, war leader Brickstall felt something he had rarely experienced: disappointment. On Zephyr Prime, the logical Zephyrians calculated that surrender had always been the only rational choice, but somehow felt unsatisfied with the math. War Prime. Zakthul watched the broadcast from his command ship and felt a mixture of relief and regret. Relief that he wouldn't have to use the void spheres. Regret that such magnificent warriors had finally been broken. War Prime, his tactical officer reported. Human ships throughout the galaxy are powering down their weapons and broadcasting surrender codes. Very good. Begin landing troops on their major colonies. I want their military leadership in custody within 6 hours. But Zakthul should have remembered the ancient human saying, "If something seems too good to be true, it probably is." Commander Alex North floated in the airlock of a stealth shuttle, watching the massive void sphere that hung in space near Mars. The device was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them directly. "Remember," Dr. Carter's voice came through his helmet radio, "once you're inside, you'll have maybe 30 minutes before the sphere's defenses adapt to your presence. Get to the central chamber, upload the virus, and trigger the cascade shutdown. And then every prison sphere in the galaxy opens at once and 40 species get their freedom back." North checked his equipment one last time. He carried a datapad with Carter's virus program, a cutting torch to get through the sphere's hull, and enough explosives to level a city block. He wouldn't need the explosives for the mission, but he figured if he was going to die anyway, he might as well make it spectacular. "Commander," came Sullivan's voice over the radio, "are you sure about this? Admiral, somebody once told me that humans stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Those 40 species have been prisoners for thousands of years. It's time they got to go home." North activated his suit's thrusters and headed for the sphere. Behind him, 5 other volunteers followed in their own shuttles. They had all volunteered for the mission, knowing it was one way. They had all watched Captain Morrison sacrifice himself to save 3 planets, and they all understood that sometimes the price of doing what's right is everything you have. The sphere's surface was like nothing North had ever seen. Up close, the geometric patterns were clearly artificial, but they moved with an organic fluidity that made his eyes water. His cutting torch barely scratched the material at first, but Carter had predicted this. The sphere was designed to resist external attacks, not infiltration. "Focus the beam on the pattern intersections," Carter advised. "The structure should be weaker there." It took 20 minutes of careful cutting, but finally North's torch broke through. The hole was barely large enough for a person, but it would have to do. One by one, the 6 humans squeezed through into the interior of the void sphere. What they found inside defied every law of physics North knew. The sphere was bigger on the inside than the outside, its walls stretching away into impossible distances. Floating platforms connected by bridges of solid light carried them through what looked like a pocket universe. "Commander," one of his team members, Lieutenant Janet Kane, whispered over the radio. "Are those?" "Yeah," North replied, staring at the thousands of transparent cells that lined the sphere's interior walls. "Those are the prisoners." Each cell contained members of a different species. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that North couldn't even tell which end was the head. But all of them were clearly intelligent, clearly alive, and clearly trapped. "How long have they been in there?" asked Sergeant Tim Brooks. "Some of them for thousands of years," North replied. "Can you imagine? Watching your entire civilization get erased, then spending millennia in a cage?" They made their way toward the center of the sphere, following Carter's directions. The central chamber was a massive room filled with control panels and energy conduits. At its heart sat a pillar of pure energy that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the universe itself. "This is it," North said, pulling out his data pad. "Carter, I'm at the central control matrix, beginning upload now." "Upload confirmed," came Carter's voice. "Alex, once you activate that program, there's no going back. The sphere will start breaking down immediately." "I understand." North looked around at his team. "You all understand what happens next?" Lieutenant Kane smiled grimly. "We get to watch the biggest jailbreak in galactic history." North inserted the data pad into what looked like a control port. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pillar of energy began to pulse faster, and alarms started sounding throughout the sphere. "Upload complete," reported North. "Activating cascade shutdown in 3 on 2, 1. He pressed the final sequence, and the universe exploded into light. All across the galaxy, 12 void spheres began to crack and break apart. From each one, ships began to emerge. Ancient vessels from species that had been considered extinct for millennia suddenly appeared in space, their crews blinking in the light of stars they hadn't seen in centuries. War Prime Zakthul watched in horror as his ultimate weapons crumbled to dust, releasing prisoners he had thought safely contained forever. "Impossible," he whispered. "The humans surrendered, they gave up." But even as he spoke, he realized the truth. The surrender had been a trick, a way to get close to the spheres while the hegemony's attention was focused on accepting the human. Capitulation. While he had been planning victory parades, the humans had been planning the greatest rescue mission in galactic history. "War Prime," his tactical officer reported, panic clear in his voice. "We're detecting massive fleet movements throughout human space. They're not surrendering. They're attacking." The hidden human fleets that had been waiting in dark space between the stars suddenly appeared around every major hegemony position. But they weren't alone. The freed species, grateful for their liberation, had immediately joined the fight. Ancient weapons thought lost forever began firing on hegemony ships. On Earth, President Santos watched the battle reports with growing amazement. "How many ships are we looking at?" "Over 10,000, Madam President," reported her military advisor. "The freed species brought their entire surviving fleets. Some of these civilizations are more advanced than we are, and they're all fighting. Alongside us?" "Yes, ma'am. Apparently spending a few thousand years in prison gives you strong feelings about the people who put you there." Back in the Epsilon system, Admiral Sullivan commanded the combined fleet from her battered flagship. Around her, ships from 40 different species worked together in perfect harmony, united by their hatred of the hegemony and their gratitude to humanity. War Prime Zakthul found himself facing not just the human fleet, but the combined forces of every species his empire had ever conquered. His numerical advantage had vanished overnight, replaced by a desperate fight for survival. "All ships, retreat to the core worlds," he ordered. "We'll regroup and—" War Prime, his communications. Officer interrupted. "We're receiving a message from Admiral Sullivan." Sullivan's face appeared on the main screen, and Zakthul was surprised to see that she was smiling. "War Prime," she said, "I believe you wanted to teach the galaxy a lesson about defying the hegemony. Well, consider this our response. Surrender, now, and we'll show you the same mercy you showed your prisoners." Zakthul looked around his bridge at officers who had served him faithfully for decades. He thought about the 40 species now free because of human sacrifice. He thought about Captain Morrison, who had died to save strangers. He thought about Commander North, who had given his life to free prisoners he had never met. "Human Admiral," he said finally, "in 8 centuries of conquest I have learned many things about war, about power, about the nature of strength. but I have never encountered a species like yours. We're not that special, War Prime. We just believe that some things are worth fighting for. Yes, Sakthul said quietly. I am beginning to understand that. He straightened in his command chair. I formally surrender the hegemony fleet to the combined forces of the Federation and the liberated species. The war was over. 6 months later, on a space station built from the wreckage of the star-draining device, children from dozens of species learned about the day humanity reminded the galaxy what courage truly means. The station orbited the healthy star of the Epsilon system, its 3 planets green and thriving below. At the center of the station stood a memorial wall with the names of every human who had died in the battle. At the top, in letters that could be seen,